my name is Chris Washburne, and I'm a trombone player that spent a lot of my time in my professional life playing music that is oftentimes called Latin jazz. Today I would like to answer the question, what is Latin jazz for you? This is not such a simple answer, but we can think of it in a variety of ways. So the simple way is that it's a type of music that combines jazz with various musical styles from Latin America or the Caribbean. But it's not just Latin American and Caribbean music, and it's not just jazz, it's kind of this middle ground where there's almost equal weight or close to equal weight between those different styles. Now, many people believe that this style of music emerged in 1947, in particular with two musicians that were very interested in combining these two different styles. One was Dizzy Gillespie, a trumpet player, and the other was Mario Balza, a Cuban arranger, trumpet player, and saxophone player. Mario Balza introduced Dizzy Gillespie to a very famous Cuban percussionist named Chano Pozo. They got together and started to write music and perform. They played at Carnegie Hall, they played up at Boston Symphony Hall, and they also played at the Apollo Theater. And it was a very unique mix of kind of big band jazz with Latin rhythms. And this is really where the term Latin jazz starts to emerge, where the music was different enough from big band jazz of the 1940s and different enough from Cuban dance music that people started calling it something different. At first, Dizzy Gillespie started calling it cubop, which was the word Cuba and bebop mixed together, to really show this equal weight between the two different styles. It was a very successful stylistic mixing, and what it did is it started to change the repertoire of jazz, where people started to incorporate more Latin American and Caribbean rhythms into their performance, and also more and more musicians from Cuba, as well as other places in Latin America, started to participate in jazz. This style of music has been with us and identified as a separate style of music from the mid-1940s. That's the simple answer. The more complicated answer, though, we have to go much farther back to the very beginnings of jazz. New Orleans is the city that's most associated with the beginnings of jazz. But if you've ever been to New Orleans, you'll notice a few things. One, the people down there, they kind of speak a little differently than other places in the United States. They actually have different food, different architecture, and different musical styles. And that's because New Orleans can really be viewed more as a Caribbean city than a North American city. Indeed, for many, many years, it was the French that administered that place, same with the Spanish. And it wasn't until the early 1800s that we start to see it become part of the United States. Why is that significant? Well, that's significant in the sense that culturally it was a lot different from North American cities. Also, it was the biggest port city that we had for many years in the United States, and it would trade with many South American and Caribbean places. So there was a big interchange of peoples going back and forth. So when you start to listen to early versions of jazz, you'll not only hear the blues, which is a really big component of jazz. You'll hear North American popular song, which is important, brass bands, but you'll also hear a lot of Caribbean rhythms and Latin American rhythms. Because at those parties that those early jazz musicians were playing and making a living and in the various venues, they were not only playing the popular music from North America, but they were also playing popular Cuban and Latin American styles. And so it played a really fundamental role early on. So in some ways you can think about early jazz as Latin jazz too, if you use the definition that I provided in the beginning, where it's a mixture of these two places. So it becomes a very crucial component of the foundations of jazz. But how we view it now as a separate style is really kind of the legacy that Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo gave us. But maybe it's better to think about the fact that maybe Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie just reinvigorated that connection and brought it to the front and started calling it out by calling it cubop and letting people know this is a significant part of what jazz is. Thank you.